Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, a very special episode. We are doing a report card on the Obama administration. And our very special guest this evening, Monty Morton, a walking encyclopedia and a conservative entrepreneur. Monty, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
Tonight, I want to speak with you on your expertise, which is Obamacare, and then I want to talk about the domestic front, the economy of the Obama administration, and then focus on his foreign policy. Okay. Let us begin, Monty Morton, with Obamacare.
Before we get into Obamacare, in summary, I think we can say at best, or at best, Obama probably deserves a D, and at worst, he probably deserves an F in most every case. And what I want to do tonight is kind of go through these particular areas that Jamie touched on and kind of prove the point. And we'll start with the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. This all started with the president making certain assertions and certain promises. We're all familiar with the, if you want your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you want to keep your plan, you can keep your plan. And in addition to that, he promised most families would save $2,500. The objective of Obamacare was to ensure the uninsured, and the goal that the administration had was to have 7 million people enrolled by the end of March, 40% of which had to be what they call the young invincibles. And the reason why we needed the young invincibles was very simple. When they designed Obamacare, the premiums for the age 25 to 35 was loaded about 100 to 200% more than prior private plans were costing. And the reason why was if they got enough young people, that premium flow would offset the costs for the older, sick people. So, where are we? Well, premiums have gone up. In fact, the Heritage Foundation did a study, and in 45 of 50 states, premiums have gone up from about 7% to over 250%. We've had 5 million people whose health plans have been canceled. And here we have Harry Reid saying, well, all of that is a lie. And all these horror stories that we hear, Harry Reid gets down to the Senate floor and he says, well, that's not true. All of that is a lie. And it's funny, if I can digress for a moment, Jamie, Harry Reid reminds me of that crazy uncle that we all have. You know, he runs around in the house in his pajamas. You don't let him out of the house. The only thing he's good for is to go to bar mitzvahs and weddings, and probably after the meal service. and you really don't pay too much attention to him. And yet, I received an email from an extended family member, and I would like to just share it with everyone if I might. And this has to do with a real example with a young woman who has a significant health issue, and she writes to me, "Hi, Monty. Just want to let you know about the lovely and amazingly well thought out, unaffordable Obama Doesn't Care Act. We lost our doctor, and our insurance is going up $1,000. So I'm just wondering about, you get to keep your doctors, and is it affordable, and all those BS lies." Real story.
Monty, let me interrupt for a minute. We have quite a few lies. We have Obama saying if you like your doctor and you like your plan, you can keep your doctor and your plan. Lie. But even in terms of these horror stories, like you've said, it's what, 5 million people that have had their insurance or coverage canceled?
That's correct.
That's a horror story.
Yes.
Why would Reid say that that's not true? How do they get away with saying that it's not true? 5 million people's
You know,
lives.
the committed left will believe what they want to believe. And I think they revel in the dogma and the rhetoric that the left puts out. And I think that Reid is basically the cheerleader.
Okay.
And that's what his job is. The serious independent doesn't pay much attention to him. Certainly the knowledgeable conservative doesn't pay attention to him.
Neither does the media. Monty, the administration brags a lot about sign-ups, but that's different from enrollments. Can you educate us a little bit?
Excellent, yes.
I caught that, didn't I?
Right,
Yeah.
right, excellent.
Okay.
As of today, the administration is saying that we have approximately 4.2 million people who have signed up. Now, recognize I didn't say enroll. In fact, Henry Chow, who was in charge of the federal website told the administration that there was no back-end payment system for Obamacare. Now, what does that mean? If somebody goes onto the website, somebody goes on to healthcare.gov, and they put in their information, at one point there was no system where the software could communicate with the insurance company to transmit money from the government website to the insurance company. So the question becomes, we might have 4.2 million sign-ups, but do we really have 4.2 million bona fide enrollments? And that's the difference.
Thank you, Monty. Explain to us a little bit about adverse selection. This is a very important thing in this whole drama.
You have done your homework,
I've done
Dr.
my homework.
Dr. Glazov. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Adverse selection. We spoke about this, I think, back in December or January on one of the Glazov games. And the way the ACA was designed, it's dependent upon young people enrolling in the program. Now, one of the good things about the ACA, in fact, it's the only good thing about the ACA, is the fact that it covers pre-existing conditions, which means if you have diabetes, if you have a heart condition, if you have some other condition, irrespective of that condition, you can enroll in the ACA and be covered. The problem with trying to rely on the young people is that the premiums in that age group from 25 to 35 are about 50%, 100% more. So the question becomes, why would a young person enroll in the ACA if their premiums are 100% higher than what they would have been? And why would they enroll if they can wait until they're sick? The answer is they wouldn't. That is adverse selection. And adverse selection is nothing more than selecting out a group of people that you either need to be in the plan or you're excluding out of the plan. So in this particular case, ACA is dependent upon younger people being in the plan, paying their premiums, yet Obamacare is selecting out those people because they can enroll at any time. So those premium dollars are not coming in, which is going to create upward pressure.
Thank you, Monty. We need to exit our Obamacare discussion to get to the other two issues. But before we do, let's conclude. What is the target number they need and where are they at now?
Okay. The target number they need, according to the CBO, was 7 million people by the end of March, of which 2.8 million needed to be in that invincible group. Right now they have 4.2 million. About 25% are the young invincible. We've had 5 million cancellations, so we have a negative enrollment of 800,000.
And so what happens?
Well, what will happen ultimately is that if they don't get the young invincibles, if they ultimately don't get enough people, basically what will happen is there'll be an upward pressure on premiums because the insurance companies won't be getting enough. And in the end, what have we accomplished? We basically have turned the entire health system upside down, and we haven't even gotten the uninsured. We're only getting 10% of the uninsured.
So what happens?
I think it implodes. It becomes a disaster.
And what happens?
What happens? There's going to have to be a change. Something's going to have to happen.
And it could either be that they get rid of Obamacare and maybe we go back to what was, or the radical left tries to impose single payer?
That is ultimately, I think, the surreptitious objective here is to go single payer. And if you look at everything that's happened, everything keeps moving people, less doctors, less this, less that, into a single payer system.
Monty, how many physicians in California have chosen to participate and not to participate?
Great question. In California,
that's my job.
60% of the physicians have decided not to participate in the ACA.
60%?
About 60%. And of those physicians who are in network, there's 50% less physicians in network that used to be in network under private plans. Why? Reimbursements.
Sounds like a horror story again before we leave, but this is crucial. Obama has been making his own laws. They keep changing the laws in terms of how Obamacare is going to work with these executive orders. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, look, there's been other presidents that have used executive orders before. I think this is crucial to crystallize for our audiences. how would you say that these particular executive orders of Obama's are different from previous executive orders?
This is an abject disregard for the Constitution. The liberal will say he has changed absolute dates mandated by Congress probably a half a dozen times, and he's changed other provisions in Obamacare about 37 times. And the liberal will say, well, wait a minute. Clinton, Bush, they issued executive orders. What I did is there were about 1,000 executive orders issued by Clinton, issued by Bush, and issued by Obama in combined. I went to the Federal Register, and I started looking through all the executive orders. Not one executive order did I find from Bush or Clinton where they changed a date of a law that was mandated by Congress.
Okay. And Monty, this is unlawful.
Yes.
And how is this happening? Why isn't anything being done about it?
Because I don't think the Republicans want to make an issue of it, because right now they're intent on trying to get the Senate, and they're intent on 2016, and the Democrats do a wonderful job of blasting Republicans.
But you would think that they would want to make an issue.
Well, I would think so too. But you don't. But we have a Senate which is controlled by Democrats, and if the House brought something up, it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, Monty, your grade on Obamacare for this section.
I can't give him an F, but I can give him a D minus.
A D minus?
A D minus. And the reason why I can't give him an F is because at some point in time, this country was headed towards some type of revamp of our healthcare system. But this one is a disaster.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to something else I think that might be arguably a disaster. The economy under Obama. Let us begin with something that I know very much concerns you and that you know a lot about, the national debt.
Wow. You know, Jamie, I become concerned about, I have 11 grandchildren, very fortunate, and I'm concerned about what's going to happen with them 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And how are they going to deal with this mounting debt? And a lot of people, they think, you know, this debt, it's an illusion. It's not real.
What is the debt?
Right now, it's $17.5 trillion.
What was it when Obama came in?
10.8 trillion.
Okay, so he's added 7.
He's added about 7, right.
Okay.
Now, the test as to a country's health, economic health, is the ratio of its debt to the total output of its goods and services, which is the gross domestic product. If we take a look at some countries which are just mired in economic lethargy, you have Japan, you have Greece, you have Spain, their ratio of debt to GDP goes from 125 to about 240%. And again, the liberal will say, well, wait a minute, look what Reagan did, or look what Bush 2 did, or look what this one did. When Reagan ended, the ratio of our debt to GDP was about 52%. Clinton was 57%. Bush 2 was 75%. This is the first time in American history that our debt exceeds 100% of our total output.
Monty, what might happen because of this?
Well, at some point, once the Federal Reserve stops buying Treasury securities and mortgage-backed bonds, there's going to be too much supply, and there may not be enough buyers, because the biggest buyer now is the federal government. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen is institutions and other governments are going to say, we need to have a higher rate of interest to compensate us for the risk.
Okay.
So if we go to, let's say, 6%, right now the interest on our debt is around $400 billion. At 6%, and that consumes about 12% of our revenues. Mm-hmm. At 6%, the interest on our debt goes to over $1 trillion, and that will consume close to 1/3 of all the revenues. Where's that money coming from, Jamie?
And so arguably this could lead to a collapse. Before we move on to foreign policy, what do you say to the liberals and to a lot of the leftists that I speak to that for some reason keep telling me that Obama has cut the deficit? What are they talking about? Very quickly, please.
That's like me giving you a cold and then offering you a Kleenex and saying that I've helped you. That is the most ridiculous thing. First of all, the annual deficits under Obama prior to his budget of 2015 was well over $1 trillion. What has reduced the deficit down to about $500 billion? No more Iraq, no more Afghanistan, and the cessation of the Bush tax cuts. Those three things have reduced the deficit. There's nothing that Obama has done to reduce spending. His budget is $3.9 trillion. That's significantly more than it was 2 years ago.
Okay, Monty, your mark for the economy.
F.
An F. So Obamacare gets D minus, economy gets an F.
Right.
We only have a couple minutes left. Foreign policy, Monty Morton. Allies don't trust us, enemies don't fear us. That's one of the ideas you put into my head.
Right.
Let's begin with that.
Right. You're right. No one trusts us, no one respects us, no one fears us. Let me ask you a question, Jamie. What do you call a government that spies on its people and lies to its people?
I don't know.
Tyrannical.
Okay.
Tyrannical. Now, some people will say, gee, that's pretty harsh. And you know what? Maybe a year ago, I would have agreed. But now, as I'm seeing what's happening, we're inching closer to that. We have to look at Benghazi. We have to look at the fact that the Senate committee said Benghazi was preventable. We have to look at Syria and the cowardly approach our president took by drawing a red line and then retreating from that red line. We have to look at his statement that we've got Israel's back, when in fact Iran has a gun to Israel's head. We know that as we speak, Iran now has 18,000 centrifuges spinning. They're still enriching uranium. We've alienated Egypt, and now we have the Ukraine and Crimea. And I must tell you, when, again, Obama made one of his famous assertions, there'll be costs to pay. What costs? Putin is going to annex the Crimea. That's pretty obvious. And the question is, and some people will ask me, well, what should we do? The question isn't what should we do. The question is what should we have done for the last 5 years? And for the last 5 years, what we should have been concentrating on is doing exactly what Ronald Reagan did. And what Ronald Reagan did is he didn't have to fire a missile. He didn't have to fire a gun. He beat Russia economically. And with developing oil, developing natural gas, and killing Russia with 70% of their exports is oil and gas. If we were doing that, and we were the primary exporters, the ruble is close to the precipice of crumbling now. This would put them over the edge.
Monty, I wish we had more time to talk about all these issues. Thank you so much for dispensing all of this knowledge. Your mark for foreign policy for Obama?
D.
D. So D minus for Obamacare, F for the economy, and D for foreign policy.
Other than that, he's doing a good job.
Oh, I hear you. It was an honor and a privilege to have you here.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Monty.
Thank you, Jamie.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for joining the Glazov Gang, and support the Glazov Gang. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel on which you are watching this program, and like the Glazov Gang on Facebook, and we'll see you next week. Good night.